more than you'll be shot in the face.
Come on
and
now.
if you cannot accept that, do
Right.
not get involved past coming to an event like this and listening.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Right.
But take heart,
Yeah.
because Jesus was not betrayed by the people in front of him,
No, that's
but by the people behind him.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
And yet he loved them, and he still went to the cross.
Yeah.
Our country is in trouble. And it's not in trouble because of Hollywood, in trouble because of Wall Street, or in trouble because of Washington. Those institutions certainly have influenced the finances, the government, the entertainment, the news influences of our world. But the fact is, they are only powerful because those of us who could have accessed God's power chose for whatever reason not to. And we've allowed them to go unchecked and unchallenged.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if we wonder why the finances of this country collapsed, it's because greed overwhelmed on Wall Street.
Yes.
And because most of the voices of this country were silent when Wall Street became no longer a place where people invested money in goods and services that had tangible worth, and instead they invested in the nebulous ideas of what might have worth, and they bet both ways so that there was no way they could lose, but no way you could win.
Yeah. That's true.
And they bet your homes and your futures and your children's futures so they could make a quick buck. And they did it in a manner in which it was as ungodly as anything ever was. They took what once was the idea of real capitalism and they turned capitalism into a casino where they no longer were investing in something that would bring jobs. They invested in that which was merely the game of chance in which they were destined to win, because the house always wins and the poor sucker putting his bet down on the table always loses.
Yeah.
And you wonder why more voices out of Washington didn't cry out against that. I'll tell you why. Because those voices were on the other end of a hand that had been carefully greased in campaign contributions from those who had been the beneficiary of a laissez-faire approach to your money.
Yes.
That's why.
Yeah.
And if we don't have the prophets who will stand in the pulpits and on the street corners of America and call for a simple sense of what our founding fathers believed was so important, and that is that all of us are created equal.
Yes.
There's nobody who is worth more than another and nobody who is worth less than another. And that is why, my dear friend, that it is not only true for the fiscal sanity of our country, but that is why that the message of the sanctity of every human life is non-negotiable. Because we cannot come to the place in this country where we ever accept that some people are worth less than other people and some people are worth more than other people. We cannot sit back and silently watch as some people are trotted off as disposable and expendable. In January, I went to Auschwitz for the second time in my life. And I was there on the 69th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. It was a remarkable day because on that day, almost the entire Israeli Knesset had flown in to be part of a ceremony on the very grounds of Auschwitz, along with survivors of the Holocaust, many of them now in their 90s. Their numbers are dying off. But they remember what it was to be in that place, not able to walk around where they wanted, but with a number tattooed on their hand, their identity taken from them, their dignity stripped from them, as was their clothing and their profession and the relationships with their families. And it was the goal that the Nazis had to kill every living Jew on the planet. And they were incredibly close to succeeding. Incredibly close. And had it not been for finally a moral awakening in this and other countries around the world, and when nations finally did as Jason so eloquently stated, said, whoa, and the world knew we meant it, did we finally put a stop. And 69 years ago, that horrible hell called Auschwitz was finally liberated. And the handful of people who had not been murdered savagely by the Nazis that were still left were freed. And 69 years later, on that very day, a government that they believed would never exist, a government that was populated largely with the sons and the grandsons of those Holocaust survivors, set feet on that place in absolute victory. There were no Nazi flags flying over Auschwitz that day, and there never will be again. The very fact that Israel lives is a reminder that we may break our promises to him, but our God will never break his promises to us.
Amen.
And the only thing sadder than what happened at Auschwitz and the horrors that were inflicted with the Nazis is that it can happen again. When people say, how can it happen again? I tell you, it happened then, even in the presence of a nation that was the most educated, sophisticated, and advanced scientifically, theologically, and technologically on the earth. There was no nation more advanced than the Germans were. Their technology greatly exceeded ours. Their science greatly exceeded ours. Their theologians were far more well-trained than ours. How on God's earth could such a horror be given birth in an environment of such advancement and educational excellence? Because somebody was able to convince others that there's such a thing as a disposable and expendable life. That's where it started. And from there, it's not that many steps toward moving 6 million people into crematoriums. And that's why today, this is not about preserving a little bit of our wealth and making sure we have a little bit of nest egg when we retire. God help us if the only thing we're concerned about is protecting our pocketbooks. Forgive me, but I'm just sick and tired of people who make it as if the only matters that we should concern ourselves with are financial matters of making ourselves more prosperous. Prosperity is a wonderful thing if we use it for the right purposes.
Amen.
But to my dear friends in the libertarian movement who say they don't want to hear about morality, they don't want to hear about life, they don't want to hear about marriage, these are issues that do not concern them, I would suggest to them that a nation that loses its morals will soon lose what little money it will have left, and all the money in the world will never be able to buy righteousness back once it's good.
Amen.
So I urge you, set your pulpits on fire with a sense of urgency and passion. Understand that it's not about doing a little better than the church down the street. It's not about counting the nickels and noses and making sure they're a little better than they were a year ago. We've got to recognize it, as I think Jason so eloquently said it. My goodness, it was brilliant. That God raised up this country for a purpose. A purpose. And if we live that purpose, he will continue to empower us.